Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee on this Halloween night, the 31st of October, 2018. A little bit late on the live stream tonight. Just took it a bit easy today and went out to dinner and had some fried alligator, which was really good. I haven't had it in a long, long time. It was terrific, along with some fried shrimp. Had an after dinner cigar, and now just kind of relaxing and looking ahead to the weather going forward, which is looking pretty busy. We have a very active pattern that's setting up for the next couple of weeks, the way the long range is setting up, and we're already seeing that tonight in a number of areas. I'm going to start off with the severe weather that's going on tonight. We'll take a look at the Storm Prediction Center's current map and the radar that is underneath it, and then we're going to take a look at the tighter radar views in just a moment. But very busy tonight in terms of the risk area. We've got tornado watches up for eastern Texas and much of western Louisiana into a good chunk of the state of Arkansas. You can see that's all embedded inside a rather large area of enhanced risk across the western and central Gulf states. And also that risk area extends north and east into Mississippi and even up into parts of Tennessee. We're seeing some heavy rains on the northern edge of that, outside of the warm sector, moving into Missouri and in through southern Illinois and Indiana. Otherwise, it's fairly quiet on either side. But the radar on the tight view, definitely very busy. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Just want to point out a few of the other watches that are up tonight, showing you on the weather.gov watches and warnings map. And the green areas, those are all flood watches that are up from western New York on south and westward into southern Ohio, southernmost Indiana, western Kentucky, northwestern Tennessee. The yellow area is where we have the tornado watches up, and we also have in those red boxes, we've got some flash flood warnings that are up. And in the Pacific Northwest, in the bluish purple there, those are winter weather advisories, because we do have some winter weather that is beginning to get underway. And that is going to mean for some snow up into the northern Rockies. And as we go through the long range, you're going to see that more and more areas, that area of snow is going to grow. Now, here's the radar view. Very, very busy. Squall line, that snaking squall line of severe thunderstorms moving into northwest Louisiana, and it kind of snakes down into eastern Texas. Please, again, always bear in mind, if you're watching this on a replay later tonight, this is the radar as of 10:03 Eastern time, so you want to make sure that you check your local radars and your any watches and warnings that are up from your local National Weather Service office or offices, and you can always get to that by going to weather.gov. Now, I'll send this out a bit further to the east, and you can see the eastern extent of it kind of narrows a bit as you go up into northern Kentucky, southern Ohio. We have this frontal system that's taking shape, a weather system that's going to run into the east, kind of falls apart on Thursday, and then a second more important wave is going to generate as we move into Friday night into early Saturday. And up in the northwest, we're seeing some snow showing up on the radar here in the Pacific Northwest and up in the northern Rockies. That's rain up in the Pacific Northwest and some snow up in the northern Rockies. So indeed, a very, very busy radar. Now, going forward over the next couple of days, we want to examine what the Storm Prediction Center is telling us with respect to the risk area. And there is going to be a severe weather risk again for tomorrow. The Thursday severe weather risk will cover the central and eastern Gulf states, the lower part of the Gulf states, across these southeastern Louisiana, southern Mississippi, Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, southwestern Georgia, all in a slight risk. And you can see the marginal risk extends a little bit further north and east of there and on up off the southeast coast with a general area of thunderstorms that extends northward into southern New Jersey and southern Pennsylvania. The northeasternmost areas, by the way, probably we're not going to see too much there until Thursday night into Friday morning. So this actually takes the risk area from Thursday 8 a.m. to Friday 8 a.m. And when we go to the next day, which is the day 3 outlook, so this is the outlook for Friday into Saturday morning, you've got a marginal risk of severe weather covering a good chunk of northern Florida, and then that runs up through southeastern Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina into southern Virginia, with the general risk for thunderstorms pushing further north up into my neck of the woods, eastern Pennsylvania, and on up into southern New England. Now, overall, when we take a look at the rainfall for the next 7 days, it's going to be impressive, pretty much. And the reason for this is that because we not only have this weather system that is setting up for Thursday, tomorrow, and into Friday night and Saturday, but there's going to be one right behind that for the early part of next week. So a large area of heavy rains, all the brighter reds and oranges and yellows. You're talking about 4 or 5 inch plus rain amounts. That covers a good chunk of the Ohio Valley to the middle Mississippi Valley, and then on up through the northern mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, showing some excessive rainfall amounts. So this looks to be a pretty hefty precip producer, this weather pattern that we're going into with these weather systems coming through every couple of days. And the character of this, by the way, is going to be that with each of these strong cold fronts coming by, there will be shots of cold air behind it, and it's likely that each front, each air mass that follows each cold front will be each one will be colder. The shot of cold air, it gets progressively colder as we go through the long range period. And also, by the way, seeing some fairly decent melted liquid amounts over the next 7 days in parts of the northern Rockies. And some of that is going to be in the form of snow. And we're also seeing some heavy rains coming into the Pacific Northwest. The Southwest is dry. California is mostly dry. The Gulf states are pretty wet. Some of this is front end loaded. And what I mean by that is some of that is what is already going on now. So we're going to see amounts added to that. Amounts tail off a bit as we head into central and into southern Florida. So what is happening pattern-wise? Well, let's take a look first off. I'm going to jump over to the teleconnections tonight. We talked yesterday about the fact that the teleconnections were not giving clear signals, and in a lot of ways they still aren't really giving the clearest of signals here, but they are at least pointing to something going on in the longer range. So the teleconnections that I think that are important here, that really sort of stand out to me, is the fact that the Pacific North America Index, the PNA, which basically tells you the relative strength of the ridge in the west and the trough in the east. It is strongly positive here as we go into this weekend, and then it kind of drops sharply negative, but then starts to rise toward the neutral line later next week, and then goes back positive later in the long-range period. The North Atlantic Oscillation, the NAO, measuring the existence or non-existence of blocking, well, that's on the strongly positive side at the moment and gets even stronger. So that at least signals that weather systems are going to be moving along. But then it does drop down toward the neutral line, even go slightly negative at one point toward the middle of next week, and then just kind of straddles right above the neutral line after that. The EPO's got my attention because the EPO, when the Eastern Pacific Oscillation goes negative, that's usually a fairly good sign of pointing to colder weather coming into the eastern part of the United States. Now, remember, it's all relative. We are talking about the first part of the month of November, but the EPO is forecast by the GFS ensemble models to go negative as we move into next week and then stay basically negative through the rest of the long range period. So at least that EPO indicates that there is some kind of cold Canada connection that is going to come into play. And when we watch the upper air on the GFS, one of the things that is obvious through the whole 16-day period is that we keep seeing this tendency for troughs to come in to the eastern part of the United States. It's a broad trough into next week. You have ridging going on off both coasts, nothing exceptionally strong, but there is troughing in the middle, and then gradually that trough position does wind up shifting to the east. You've got a development here that we should pay attention to, and that is this strong storm that forms north of the Azores. It is creating a situation where we're going to continue to see higher than normal pressures and higher than normal heights up in the northern part of Canada and over the Arctic region. So this continues to favor a displacement of the jet further south. This is a pretty cold look when you look at the upper air going into later next week. That is a very rather impressive trough and connection that runs, the jet connection that runs from northern Canada, drops southward into the Great Lakes and into the eastern part of the United States, and then turns northeastward from there. So there is cold air that's going to be coming down. The ridge out in the west comes back to some degree, especially as we get even deeper into the long range. And notice that you still have the trough wanting to be in the east. We're now at day 12 and 13, and it just continues right through the long range period. So the overall trend for the first half of the month of November is going to wind up being a rather busy one with regards to the day-to-day weather pattern and the day-to-day changes that are going to be underway. So we'll take a look at what this all spells out at the surface. And of course, you know, we had a pretty decent day today. You've got this high going off the East Coast. You'll notice that there's a weather front that is running from western New York down into Ohio and Indiana. That eastern part of that front really weakens. And then you've got this second wave that comes out. There's your severe weather, by the way, that moves through the Gulf states tonight, through the western and into the central Gulf states tonight and Thursday. Low pressure runs up Thursday night into Friday morning. So you get a wave that runs into the northeast with rain. Then we wait for yet a third wave that comes up Friday night into Saturday morning. This is going to bring rain to the northern mid-Atlantic and the northeast Friday night into Saturday morning. By Saturday by morning, the front is on the coast. It moves offshore, and then we start to see improving weather conditions. But you can already begin to see the next weather system starting to take shape. That next high is going to go out into the Canadian Maritime. So we're going to wind up with an onshore flow that develops early next week. And then as low pressure comes out of the southern plains, and by the way, because of the deep trough that we're looking at in the upper air, we get a pretty wrapped up storm system here. It's a rather deep low that gets into central Indiana. There's not a whole lot of cold air behind this initially, so there's no snow being indicated. It's mostly a big wind and rainstorm that runs up into the Great Lakes, but that's a fairly deep low there that we get through the middle part of next week. So much of the Midwest, Ohio Valley, the Northeast, and Mid-Atlantic states to some degree are going to be dealing with some rains for Election Day. So whether that winds up having some impact on the election, we shall see. But that deep low, that 980-ish low that runs up into northern Lake Huron, that does pull down some colder air late next week that spreads across the Great Lakes and into the Northeast. And in fact, the shot here is probably it is the coldest one that we've seen in the shots of cold air that have been coming down in the last couple of weeks. This one's a bit more impressive. And now, of course, as we get deeper into the long range, one of the things that's been the GFS has been doing in its modeled runs in the last few days, it's been trying to make something in the day 10, 11 range off the East Coast. And this is where I would caution everybody in a big way that you can't look at this literally 12 days out. But what you can say is that given what the upper air is forecast to look like, it wouldn't be a shocker if something winds up happening in terms of a low development. Now, whether it winds up being where it's shown here, or usually with the error with the GFS is it winds up being too far to the east, that you wind up with a deeper low further west. But the bottom line is that the pattern is active and it is stormy. And as each one of these lows go by, you get these shots of cold air. Here we are at the middle of the month with something telegraphed in the Gulf of Maine. So look, I wouldn't at all be shocked if late in the long range period, you start to see some areas in the Northeast, in the interior parts of the Northeast, picking up accumulating snows in some areas. That would not at all surprise me. The snowfall forecast on the GFS, again, always with a grain of salt, and this is only out through 10 days, but the heavier snows, at least through this period, are going to be in the northern and central Rockies. You can see there's actually quite a bit of snow being indicated there. We're getting some pockets here in the Northeast that come late in the period. That's probably some slight lake effect that will be going on with any one of these lows that go by, with the shots of cold air and the winds coming in off the lakes. But pretty active snowfall forecast for parts of southeastern Canada. And we look at this in terms of all of North America, by the way. Again, a fair amount of additional snows continue over the next 10 days. So the snow cover will be building to some degree over North America. One of the things, by the way, we should point out is that in Western Canada, where there's been a ridge there for the last week to 10 days on and off, the snow cover that has accumulated there, a lot of that has melted. And most of the additional snow cover that has fallen in that period has been more in central and in southeastern Canada. Well, at least through this long-range period, we're likely to see some snow coming back to western Canada. It looks like the heaviest is going to be the south central and southeastern part of Canada, but we are going to pick some up also in the west and also over parts of Alaska, although it doesn't look to be all that impressive. So, the bottom line is that again, the pattern setting up is going to be very busy and very active over the next 10 days. And it's going to be very interesting for forecast-wise to watch the models change and evolve over the next couple of weeks. The fact that you're going to have higher than normal pressures up in Canada is important, in northern Canada and over the Arctic regions, because of the fact that you're going to see this jet displaced to the south. And if that scenario plays out, or if it winds up even being a little stronger than forecast, this is where you could start seeing some early snowfalls showing up once we get past the first week of November anyway. Once we get past that first full week of November and get into that second full week of November, past Veterans Day, I think then you're going to start to see more areas picking up additional snow cover. So I think we are going to have some fun forecast-wise and some challenges ahead going forward. No question about it. The teleconnections, Jason, they've been flip-flopping to some degree, but this is what happens from run to run, because remember, it's the model, The teleconnections are forecasted off the GFS ensemble. So if the GFS is changing in the forecast period, then you're going to see the teleconnections adjust. So I guess maybe what we could look for as a clue, let's watch to see if that NAO winds up being more negative than forecast. Let's also see if we wind up seeing the EPO getting more negative than forecast, because that might be a logical outcome of the higher than normal pressures up in northern Canada and across the Arctic regions. Now I'm going to bring the models back here. Of course, the model maps are always courtesy of our friends at tropicaltidbits.com. We recommend, for those of you who like to look at these weather maps on your own, I think this is the go-to site with regards to that. Why don't we take a look at the European? And the European model, the devil's always in the details with these model runs and how the models handle the upper highs, especially the ridges, and especially up in the North Atlantic where they can be inherently unstable. But even the European has the same idea with this deep low forming between Iceland and the Azores. You start to see these pressures building up across northeastern Canada and on up through Greenland and on up through the Arctic region. And here again, the European also with trying to make another deep trough coming into the eastern states later next week, and then still more troughing swinging out into the west. You got this upper low that's east of Lake Winnipeg in Canada, just kind of driving everything with as it rotates around one arm after another after another. The surface on the European, I think that's probably a good idea to take a look at that just to see if there's any differences. And we'll bring that up. So let's go back. And here's today. Okay, so there's your low for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday with your trailing cold front. This is Saturday morning, so weather conditions will improve. Sunday looks good here in the east. Then the high goes out into the Maritimes. Here comes your low for election day. The European has this becoming an intensifying storm, but it waits until it gets up into Canada to do it, rather than the GFS, which strengthens it much faster and much further south. Then that moves up into eastern Canada, and you've got a pretty strong cold high that comes in behind it for the latter part of next week. There is a wave here showing up next Friday off the southeast coast of the United States that really doesn't do very much. It's kind of a weak frontal system here, a low in Lake Superior with a front extending down, and another low off the southeast coast. That runs out toward Nova Scotia, and then you've got another shot of cold air coming in after that. But again, when you look at the upper air, that's pretty busy for the month of November. So all the models are at least telegraphing the same general idea of an active pattern. The devil will be in the details of it as we go along. But I'm going to be curious. If we had a ridge here in the eastern part of the United States, we'd be putting into snooze control for the East Coast weather. But being that we've got this trough the way it is, it certainly it certainly reinforces the notion that there's going to be a lot of changes and a lot of volatility as we move ahead. I did not have the GFS from this morning, did I? I did the 18Z. Actually, even if it was the 12Z, it's just as well. I may have I did show you the 12Z. At least we had an apples to apples comparison. Why don't we take a look at on the new run? These 18Z runs can be a little bit, off sometimes. But here's that second system. So now we have for Tuesday. So here's where the GFS did change from late this afternoon, because there you have a lead wave of rain that comes in Monday night into Tuesday. See, now then you wait for a second low that comes up that moves into Western PA, but still leaves you with the notion that you're going to have some kind of storminess going in to the east for the first part of next week. Here comes the cold shot that moves in behind it, and here's the other solution from the late day run, where you've got a low that swings out of the Great Lakes and redevelops. So right there, you can see the difference between the 12Z and the 18Z run. Thanks for pointing that out. But honestly, I think the 12Z run probably has at least for now, to me, has a much better idea of what's going to happen. The 18Z runs lately have been just a little bit on the squirrely side. Let's see. Listening to some trivia now, only listening to a few minutes. We'll watch on the playback. It says Israel. Actually, I'm down in Florida right now. Yeah, it's not hot. It was into the 80s today, but it's very dry. Dew points are quite low here, which is nice. It's incredibly comfortable. Thanks, George. Nice to see you on the YouTube live stream tonight. Johnny Quest is on, of course. Always waiting for. He's got his canoe ready. Sorry, I'm not trying to. We've been going. You and I have been kind of going through this, Johnny, with all this rain that you've had there in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and it just goes. It just goes on and on for you, and you've got some more rain to get through. Ryan Ford, our budding young future meteorologist, when you say the interior, I'm talking way interior, okay? Way interior, all right? So we got time. I saw a wonderful tweet. I put it up on my Facebook page, which kind of exemplifies the how snow lovers and the weather enthusiasts deal with their concepts of winter. So October and November is marked by all these winter forecasts of the winter being incredibly cold and incredibly snowy. Then December comes along, and those same people all come on and say winter is over because the pattern is not matching up to anything resembling that. Then January and February, we actually have winter. March, winter continues, and everybody's wondering why. And I think that really pretty much says how people approach these things. That's why I'm not, that's among one of the many reasons why I'm not a huge fan of the long range. I mean, I find it interesting. I do talk about it. We've been looking at Siberian snow cover. We've been looking at North American snow cover. But as far as for me, I am not versed at using that as a forecast tool because, as I have said many times, I am not a long range guy, and I'm not going to be. It's too much for me to get my head around, and this is one of the reasons why I would much rather have what we're having, where we're kind of watching the pattern evolve, and at some point when it comes time for the first snow, the first accumulating snows to occur, the models will be throwing out important clues. Okay, we will look for those clues when they appear. And those of you who have been with me for the past couple of years, you know quite well that I usually come out front and center when those clues start showing up. And I promise you, when they are there, we will definitely talk about them. But again, where we are in the calendar here is a huge argument against any kind of early season big snowfall. You got to wait for those puzzle pieces to show up, and right now there really isn't enough there to even go down that particular road. Everyone looks like warmth and rain coming for November. I don't think so, Mr. Livingsworth. I don't know about the warm side, and yeah. I also think you just said, you don't think you'll see your first accumulating snow. I don't know where you're from. So I guess that's going to make a big difference. But if we don't wind up seeing any real accumulating snows down in coastal areas of the Northeast and into the northern mid-Atlantic until the first part of December, that's kind of how it usually works. So let's all keep our excitement kind of keep it back a little bit. It's not there yet. This is not the time to kind of get wrapped up in all of this. Um, yes, I'm in a different spot, Techman 3330. I'm down south. You were speaking for early November. I'm just curious, Bobby, where are you? Where are you? Uh, geographically, roughly, just so I can have an idea. Weather and low is you're finally getting your low humidity and 70-degree weather. Enjoy it. Okay, this is where you enjoy what you got. Okay. Gary King's blank, sudden stratospheric warming, that may be happening. I don't really have I don't have a firm understanding of how all that works. So I'm in the student chair with that, and I'm learning every day. But with those higher pressures and heights going on up in the northern latitudes, it does point out to some sort of warming that's happening in the stratosphere. That translates eventually, can translate depending on how everything sets up, obviously. But we saw what happened last March after the mid-February huge stratospheric warming event that led to those 4 nor'easters. Now, doesn't mean it's going to lead to another 4 nor'easters when it happens again. But we'll watch to see how it evolves and watch to see how it plays out, and we'll take it from there. Let's see, awful lot of red on the precip map. Yeah, well, that's WPC from the Weather Prediction Center showing its thing. Why is it the West Coast gets early snowfalls very easily while the East Coast is hard pressed to get even early snowfalls in the elevated areas? Well, it's two different things. I mean, a lot of times there's a tendency for the ridge in the east to stay strong going into the first part of the autumn, whereas you do wind up with more troughing that occurs out in the western states. I mean, certainly that has been the case in the last number of years. You start to get the buildup out in the west first, and then it gradually spreads into the east. A lot of that has to do with topography. A lot of that has to do with the overall upper air jet stream pattern and how it sets up. But then again, Ryan, if you look at the stats over the long haul, if you look at some of the averages, for example, across much of the Rockies, they actually do get less snow, relatively speaking, during the deep winter months, and they wind up getting some of their heavier snows wind up occurring on the edges of that. So mid-fall to early winter and late winter into the early part of spring, whereas during the coldest months, the snow averages in a lot of places out in the Rockies anyway winds up actually decreasing. So it sort of evens out, because for us, our big months are January and February. If you want to give it a bigger range, you could say from the latter part of December to the last 10 days of December to the first 10, 15 days of March. That's our window. And anything on either side of that is certainly more the exception than the rule. In Northwest New Jersey, the average temperature in October was 54 degrees versus the 60 degrees for the average temperature back in October 17. Yeah, that is correct. Last October was exceptionally warm. The whole month was warm. In fact, if you remember, we actually carried that warmth in the first couple of weeks of November before the switch was flipped to extreme cold. It is different this year. We flipped that switch in the middle of the month. Temperatures have been running near or below average, not every day, but for a good part of that stretch, that has been the case. And while the first part of October was 5 or more degrees above normal, the second half of the month brought those numbers way down in most places. I haven't seen what the final tally is with regards to the temperatures in some of the cities in the Northeast, but definitely the second half took the edge off of the warm start that we had to the month of October. So, by the way, I hope everybody had a good candy-filled Halloween. Didn't That didn't happen here where I am. We were just basically out doing stuff through most of the day. So Uh, didn't see any trick-or-treaters, and I certainly didn't get any candy out of this. I did have some ice cream today, which was a nice treat. Okay, so let me we'll put an end to this at this point. By the way, for those of you who might not know this, Hurricane Oscar became an extratropical storm out in the north central Atlantic. So that's gone, and maybe that's going to wind up being the last one as far as tropical systems are concerned. Okay, so let me just do a little bit of shameless self-promotion here at this point, just to remind everybody. Then I put the link up on the chat board here for those of you who are interested. I've got my little weather network that I've built up on Patreon. It's a subscription. Uh, it's a subscription site. It's a great way to support my channel and support my videos. I appreciate those of you who have joined up, and those of you who have hit super chat. By the way, thank you very much for contributing. I really, really appreciate it. It helps pay a few bills, gets me a couple of cigars, and I'm a happy camper. But if you're looking for a complete weather experience, especially if you're in my neck of the woods, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, consider joining the Patreon network. It's just $2 a month. You get posts during the day. I haven't done any exclusive videos this week because I've been away, but I have been doing exclusive videos just for Patreon members, trying to hit that once a day. So as soon as I get back from my little trip here, we'll be going full tilt on that. And by the way, um, this is my last vacation before the winter, so I'm not going to be taking other than the odd day here and there, and it's not going to really have any impact on the stuff I do every day. I'm done with vacations now until sometime next year. So we'll be going back to the exclusive live streams on the Patreon network. So also, you can message me at any time, and I will respond to you on a timely basis. I usually try to get back to everybody within an hour, but some days, depending on where I am or what I'm doing, it might take a little bit longer. But I definitely do get back to you. So do please consider that. And for those of you who are in New Jersey, let me just remind you, next Wednesday, November the 7th, I will be at the Bayonne Library in Bayonne, New Jersey at 7 o'clock. And we'll be talking weather. I will also live stream that to everyone right here on my YouTube channel. So if you can't make it, you can watch the live stream. It is tough for me to take your questions. I'll see if I can maneuver a little bit better, but I'm doing like 5 things at once, so it does become a bit difficult at times. Do I think 99 Wolves? Do you think they get colder? Snowstorm and polar stuff by the end of the month. We're going to get cold shots, 99 Wolves, as we go through the month of November. I think the models are pretty clear on that there is going to be colder air coming in. And actually, some of the runs, the air is in parts of the Great Lakes and extending up into the western lakes of the northern plains. Some of that air is going to be very cold indeed. So yeah, I mean, we're probably going to see some shots of cold air, but remember, always, bear in mind, it's the beginning of November here. We're not in January yet. We're not even into December. So you gotta put it all in perspective. Let me just make sure I got everybody on the chat board here today, and I certainly did. So we're all good. Okay, if I missed your questions, I'm really, really sorry. But save it for the next live stream, which we will do tomorrow. All right. So we'll have our posts up on our website tomorrow. I'm not sure, in terms of the timing. I usually try to put up something up in the morning, and we'll have another live stream tomorrow night. Although again, I'm not going to be sure of the time until very late in the day. So just check my channel page every once in a while, and once I know what time it is, I've been trying to pre-schedule it. Tonight's obviously came pretty late. Patreon members, you get a direct notification that that these live streams are going to be going on. So that will happen regardless. So you'll get your notification, and then you can gravitate over to the YouTube link and join the live stream. All right, everybody have a great evening. Thanks very much for being here. We will see you hopefully tomorrow.